Hi, everyone. Today's episode is one of the most intense and shocking stories that I've heard to date. A government worker shares with us their encounter with a cover up they inadvertently got involved in. You don't want to miss this one. And then, a truck driver is approached by a terrifying being while taking a break outside of his cab. So, if you're enjoying these stories like a dog likes to sleep, then please join our pack and click all those buttons. Great, thanks. Now let's get into the stories. You will soon learn the details of why I can't share my name with you. But in short, I was exposed to a government cover-up when I worked in Washington. I can't tell you a lot of the specifics about it because if I do, well, lives will be in danger, mainly mine. But I'll tell you about one of the most intense nights that happened to me that was related to all of it. At the time, I worked on the basement floor of a building just outside the Beltway, and I had access to most parts of the building. Now, there were a few floors that had rooms I couldn't access, but mostly I had free reign of the building. One thing about the basement where I worked was that it was equipped with its own power and water supply, which I never understood at first, but we'll get more into that later. So on the 8th floor of this building, there was a restricted area that's only accessible to those who have special clearance, and I was one of those people. I had to periodically go up there and work to complete my tasks. Everyone who had access knew each other, which was important to the security of the floor. So I was working on that 8th floor one night, and it was while I was walking down the hallway within the restricted area that I noticed a figure in a blue jumpsuit walking around in a room near the end of the hall. I thought that was odd, because all of the rooms in that area are usually locked, and there should be no reason for anybody to be in that room. And also, I didn't recognize the person. So I walked over to the door and looked in through the window to watch and see what they were doing. The room was big, about 30 by 30, and it had a large window that looked out towards the city. I could see city lights in the distance. The room had white walls, and in the middle was something I had never seen in there before, a long table with 2 computer monitors. And there was also a large clock on the wall and a television screen on the wall to the right. It was turned off at the time. I was standing there for a few minutes looking in when the figure started walking towards me from the other side of the room. He looked surprised to see me standing there on the other side of the door, but just kept coming. And before I knew it, he opened the door and came out into the hall with me and stopped. He didn't really look at me, and his demeanor was strange, and so that concerned me. I asked him who he was and what he was doing there. I asked him if he had the clearance to be there. He told me his name was John, but he said he couldn't tell me any more because it was classified. I told him I had clearance. I knew everybody that was allowed in there. He said clearances didn't matter when it came to knowing the details of his work. He told me that I needed to leave and forget about what I had seen, and that he would follow up with that with his superiors, and that it was all for my own safety. As I looked him over, he did have all the proper credentials on the lanyard around his neck, and I wasn't a top-level employee, so I decided to just go back to my office, but was determined to look into him further. As I walked away, I saw him enter codes into another of the locked doors and enter there. I thought about him for the next few hours as I worked in the basement. I was trying to figure out what could be so important that they would go to such lengths to keep it hidden, especially when I had my clearances. I was also trying to decide if I should say anything to anyone right away. But before I did, I decided to go back to the 8th floor that night to see if I could figure out what was going on there. I didn't know what I would do if John was there and saw me, but I had to find out more. So when I got to the 8th floor, I walked to the door of that same room and I looked in. John was there, but this time he wasn't alone. There were 2 other men in the room with him, and they were wearing dark suits. They all had their backs to me. I was about to turn and leave when John quickly turned around and saw me, but this time he motioned for me to come in, which is not at all what I was expecting. It put me on full alert, to be honest. I opened the door and entered, and the first thing he said to me was that I had been cleared. I asked him what he meant, what was going on, but he just told me to keep quiet and watch. At this point, I was very confused, but that's when they took me over to the wall and opened up a door to an elevator that I had never seen before. They all got on, and I followed. John pushed a few buttons, and before I knew it, we were going down and eventually exited into a room that I think was in the basement, although I had never seen it before. I wondered why this was unknown to me, which, to be truthful, started to scare me. I thought about it maybe being some sort of a command center, but it wasn't. It was something much more interesting. The men then walked me over to a kind of a cage in the corner, more like a jail cell kind of an area, and pointed to the back of it. And there, in the corner of the cage, was a small humanoid creature. It didn't have any clothes on, and its skin was a pale white, so pale that I'm pretty sure I could see its bones. The eyes were also pale and looked hollow, and its head was larger than it should be for the body. The thing just sat there quietly. I don't know if it was even totally aware that I was there. It almost sort of looked drugged or something. But I know that it did have some form of awareness because it turned its head towards me when I walked up to the bars. John then said, "You will not tell anybody about this. It's too dangerous." And I just looked at him, silently wondering what this was all about. I asked him what it was, why they were keeping it a secret. He told me that it's too dangerous for the public, and that I would be in more danger if I told anyone. I then asked him why he was showing me, and he told me that he was protecting me from something, and that it was a dangerous secret too big for him to tell me all the details. So then I was taken back to the 8th floor and told to leave the building. I was left confused, almost in shock. Obviously, I had never experienced anything like this before and didn't know what to do. I decided to just keep quiet about it. So for the next few months, I would periodically go to that floor while working and see if I could see anything else going on, but never saw anything like I saw before. I also started having the feeling that I was being watched and followed at work. But every time I looked, I never saw anything, never saw anybody watching me or following me. And then I never heard anything further about what they took me to see. Nobody ever mentioned it, and I never saw John again. I'm starting to think that there was some kind of a mistake in showing me, and that's why they were watching me, and that I shouldn't have seen what I saw. So due to all that stress, I eventually quit that job and moved on, but now I'm regretting that decision because I don't feel protected. I feel out in the open. And that's what has me writing into you now, because I want this info to be shared with the public. The bottom line is that I'm convinced that I saw a real humanoid alien being, and that it was being kept at that location. I want to share this in case there are others who have seen things like this before, and I want everybody to know that I've seen it too. I saw it with my own eyes. I can't really say much more than that. That's really all that happened. But if you're willing to share this, please do. On the night I had my brief encounter, work was unusually slow. During the slow parts of my night, I park outside the facility I work out of and watch the wildlife. It's abundant with a mixture of fox, coyotes, raccoons, and every once in a while I'll spy a red wolf breaking the wood line, trotting across an open field in search of small game. Our facility is located on a dead-end street which backs up to a major creek, and to the left we have a smaller creek that breaks off to the larger one. Both creeks are fed by a large river about a mile away. I should also mention that we have a large patch of woodland that leads to our facility, and that the area does not have a lot of light until you turn into the parking lot. About a week prior to my encounter, I would sit at the end of the road to complete my paperwork and wait for the next call to come in. As I parked there, I would get a sense of being watched. I would look up almost expecting someone to be standing in front of my truck. Let me say that darkness or the woods does not spook me in the slightest or even make me jumpy. I was raised in the swamp close to a river and rather enjoy the solitude. But not only did I have a sense of being watched and sharing my space with someone, I noted that there were no normal night sounds such as crickets and frogs and what have you. I also found it baffling that all the wildlife seemed to be gone from the area. This really bothered me, and I couldn't figure it out. On the night I had my encounter, I decided to leave some wet dog food at the edge of the woodline, hoping to entice a family of raccoons out so I could see at least that they were okay. This family of raccoons I had watched grow up from kits, and not seeing them bothered me. Also, I didn't see a gray fox that would hang around the area. This fox would come within 4 to 5 feet of you, but would be guarded all the while. He would hang out with certain people and then retreat back into the woods. Anyway, I popped the top off some smelly dog food. As I was pulling the top off the can, I heard a deep growl come out of the edge of the woodline. I had never heard an animal growl with such force and so deeply. At first, I thought it could have been a jakebreak from the interstate, and that can be heard from our facility, but that's not what it was. I could feel and hear it from the woodline hitting my face, and it felt like the growl inside of my chest, like a vibration. I knew this wasn't a bear, the same as someone knows their left hand from their right. You just know. And yes, we do have bear here, but I can tell you bluntly and firmly that this was not a bear or any other wildlife that was normal to the area. I dropped my head down and refused to look up. I dumped the can of food on the ground with one hard thump and hoped that whatever was in the woodline would rather have that can of food instead of me. I backed away from the food with my head down until I reached my truck. My instinct told me to drive away, and I did. About a half an hour later, I returned, and due to my curiosity overruling my common sense, I was prepared to figure out the earlier event. I parked in the same place, and this time I walked to the back of my truck to smoke. While standing there, I observed a dark mass come across the road and disappear into an open field that's mostly overgrown with wild blackberry bushes and grass. I have a trained eye. I take in a lot of detail, and still I had to admit suffering from short-term memory loss due to a TBI that ended my law enforcement career. What I saw at the moment, though, will be in my memory forever. I can only describe this creature as what I took at the time to be some kind of hybrid. Although it was on all fours, to me it did not appear natural by any means. It moved with very quick, fluid motions. Looking back, I was most surprised by the creature having the intelligence to attempt to appear natural. Something was off with its gait, though. It was kind of like the front legs were pulling its body forward. The back was hunched at the shoulders, and it had a long back. The creature itself was black, which I can only describe as a dark mass with really no reflection. The strangest part was that I could see the definition of most of the small animal compared to the darkness of the creature that I now believe to be a dogman. The snout was long but fit its body. What struck me most were its ears. They were folded back like you might see on a Dutch shepherd or even a German shepherd. I guess with my background working with dogs, the ears were clearly defined to me. I can't say what kind of tail it had or what color its eyes were. I just know it was there one minute and gone the next. When daylight came, I looked for tracks, but listened to my gut and didn't enter the field looking for it. The ground leading down to the smaller creek was covered in grass, and what dirt was there was hard. I was left baffled, but more amazed than anything. I sat on my experience for several months and didn't tell anyone about it. I then started searching the internet for what I had seen. I guess in my mind, I wondered if it was some type of hybrid creature created by man that had somehow escaped. I found several sites on the internet, but none seemed to come close to what I had seen. Nothing until I came across a picture of a supposed dogman. If you take what I saw and stand it upright instead of being on all fours, then that's what I saw without a doubt. I'm pretty sure this dogman was a young adult, but it wasn't overly massive. What I ponder the most is the fact that the dogman had to catch my scent before clearing out the woodline. I know scent. I know how it works. The dogman knew I was there before coming out of the woods. I suppose that will be the answer I'll never have. After a few months of just keeping my experience to myself, I spoke to a few of my coworkers. Of course, they told me it was a bear or a large wolf, but they did acknowledge that the wildlife had disappeared for a while. I was told to share my story, but I think it was only so my coworkers could get a good laugh at me behind my back. I stand by what I saw, although I don't speak about it much because of people like them. As I write this, I'm once again on the night shift, parked in the same spot where I had my encounter. I'm pretty sure that Dogman has left the area. Wildlife is back and the night sounds are all around. I guess I'll always wonder if it will come back again, but I can't say I will ever walk in the woods at night again by myself looking for animal tracks.